definitely not a lull. Absolutely not a lull. Thank you so much. I'm really glad you're part of our social lists.
I love the term ice cream socialist.
Thank you. I remember I used it very early on, and someone was like, "Ooh, that's gonna get you in trouble." All right. Yeah. Good for me. Yeah. So. Are we doing this? Yeah. Introduce it. You have some things in your hand. I have things. Should I wait for this one? Will be buried. Yeah. So, Janalyn is visiting. She brought a ton of books with her, and you are not going to make her take these all home. So, we've got a ton of books here in the store, on this back table next to Kendra's book. Buy them, read them, give them life, spread the love. Yeah. So, that's your homework for tonight. That and to eat. They gave us too much ice cream. They sold us 4 times the amount of ice cream we ordered. But then I was like, this is really heavy. There's no way we ordered this much. I asked for 2 half-gallons of each flavor, and they sent us 2.5 gallons of each flavor. So we went from 2 total gallons to 10 total gallons. And luckily Anar noticed and was like, can you at least take back half of these? I noticed when we got to the trunk, and I was like, this is really heavy. No way Chandra makes any mistakes, ever. I wasn't present. Yeah. In the story. Like, they did this to me. And then it was like, can you give me back my money? So, it's pretty good. So, yes, buy books, eat all the ice cream.
Hey. So, without further ado, our third reader tonight, Janalyn Guo, comes to Austin from Salt Lake City. Her first book, a collection of short stories titled Our Colony Beyond the City of Ruins, came out with Subito Press in November of last year. Her work is forthcoming and has appeared in the Indiana Review, The Collagist, Quarterly West, and other places. She also does some game writing, contributing most recently to Tendar, an AR game app featuring a sentient AI guppy, which is my favorite sentence in English. She's excited to be reading again for Ice Cream Social, and her favorite ice cream flavor continues to be Moose Tracks. Please welcome Janalyn.
Thank you, Chandra and Anar. This is really exciting. I'm really happy to be back. It's 40 degrees warmer here than in Salt Lake City, and I feel a nice level of moisture in my palms. There. And thank you, Cecily and Kendra, for reading with me. It's been really great to hear your stories. I love them. So I'm going to read a story today called Reanimate. And I guess if I really think about it, it is maybe the closest to a love story that I've written. And since it's Galentine's Day, or the Galentine's edition of Ice Cream Social, I'm going to read it. Okay. Reanimate. While I was staying at Grandpa's for the holidays, I kept seeing strangely dressed people passing by on the street. From his second-story window, I saw their hats first, tall, white, and furry, like Cossack hats. They wore powder blue coats down to their ankles and clean, white sneakers. I wondered what kind of people would dress like that. My grandpa, his nurse, and my mother lived together in his apartment. The nurse tended to my grandpa full-time ever since his stroke 1 year ago. She slept on a small bed in Grandpa's room. My mother had a bedroom to herself whenever I wasn't around. The nurse was devoted to Grandpa's care. She only visited her own family 3 times a year for 10 days each time. All of Grandpa's pension money went to the nurse. She emptied Grandpa's urinal bag, washed him clean, flipped him over, and fed him his meals through a syringe. She kept track of his small improvements. I lived in an industrial city 3 hours away. my secretarial job at a manufacturing company prevented me from visiting very often. My boss was demanding and squeezed all the life out of me. Each time I visited, my grandpa seemed smaller in his bed. I watched as the nurse went about her task. Caring for my grandpa was a lot of lifting and holding and steadying. The nurse joked that she had gained muscle in her arms. She flexed and compared biceps with me. She told me about how grandpa's grip was slowly improving. He could gently clasp whatever was put into his right palm. The nurse slipped my hand into his hand to show me, and I could feel a slight squeezing pressure. I thought about the last time we held hands. I must have been a child. If you look into his eyes, you can see that he's registering who you are, she said. I looked into Grandpa's eyes, afraid he could see my discomfort. My grandpa opened his mouth as wide as he could. This is how he conveys that he's happy, the nurse told me. I rubbed Grandpa's hands some more. They were very smooth, like a pebble in the bed of a stream. The nurse opened my grandfather's closet, which contained 12 hangers holding the exact same shirt. The shirt was gray, soft, and didn't irritate his skin. I helped hold my grandpa up while she changed him. As the nurse went about her business, I wandered over to the window and saw another figure wearing a Cossack hat and powder blue coat crossing the street. Another one, I shouted, pointing. Maybe it's the fashion right now among the young, the nurse said as she looked out. I'm clueless on what they wear nowadays. My mother came in to tell us that breakfast was ready. What are you doing hanging out of that window? My mother asked. I told her about the people dressed strangely in the street, how odd they looked. You're going to fall out someday and break all your bones, she said. You'll have a bed right next to your grandfather. Grandpa's breath got louder and louder in the room. A little rattly, it was overtaking our voices. We all stopped to listen. It was when he sounded most alive. In the quiet of the midday, everyone in the apartment dozed. I sat on the window ledge and lit a cigarette, looking out onto the street as I smoked. Street vendors driving their carts hollered out their deals. A hunchbacked man came around collecting glass and cans. Just then, a woman in a Cossack hat and powder blue coat walked by on the street. I stubbed out my cigarette, grabbed my coat, and raced outside to follow her. It felt good to escape the apartment. The spell of everyone inside the house asleep in the bright daytime made me feel like I was wasting my life. The spring air was chilly and wet. We'd gone a full winter without any snow. It was the 5th winter in a row. I kept a safe distance behind the woman in the Cossack hat. The woman stopped at a small shop and picked up a cup of coffee. Then she walked into the subway station. I walked with her onto and off a train, past some department stores and corporate buildings, and then through the grounds of a temple that looked renovated at the entrance, but grew more and more rundown until we arrived at the forest. The forest at the heart of the city was a narrow strip of camphor trees. When I was a child, the land all around it had once been a true forest, separating our small rural village from the main city. To get to school, I had to cross the camphor forest. My cousins and I held hands, unsure of what lurked in the shadows. The main city grew over time, eventually connecting to our village. Now, what was left of the old forest was a narrow strip of trees, 3 blocks wide and 10 blocks long. There were tall buildings on both sides, their backs to the trees. AC units of all colors jutted out alongside the buildings, rumbling and churning on the hot days. They remained silent in the cold. When I entered the forest, there was an immediate silence. Darkness fell due to the canopy cover, and the light that penetrated through was slightly greenish. The pathway I walked on wound behind some seedy bars in town, but that world felt very far away. I waited on a bench at the other end of the forest for a while, hoping that the woman would reappear on the path. Nobody came. I wandered around the labyrinthine city of my childhood and looked out over it from a hill. The metal and concrete enormity of it and the dazzling lights reminded me of a spaceship divided into multitudes of compartments. The city was growing and being erased all at once. I thought of my grandpa and all that would be lost when he was gone. Once, my grandpa went on long walks through the city wearing a big straw hat for exercise. When I was little, he took care of me. I accompanied him on all his walks. He convinced me that if we made left and right turns, following a sequence that he'd written down in a little notebook he kept in his pocket, we'd wind up in heaven. Every day there was a new sequence. No path was ever the same. I often worried that we'd get lost. We found heaven in ice cream parlors, butcher shops, tailor shops, and noodle restaurants full of flies. Where were those places now? As the city darkened and everything flattened into shadow, I hurried home. I found my mother in the bar downstairs. She looked very beautiful in her red dress and her hair swept to the side and done up. She always went for all you can eat, all you can drink highball night, where customers paid a fixed fare and could order as many highballs as they wanted for 2 hours. She sat with the other regulars at a table in the corner. They smoked and drank and gossiped. She often yelled at the waiters to hurry over to take their orders, accusing them of taking their time on purpose. Come here, she said, slurring when she saw me. Meet your uncle. I shook the hand of a man I'd never met before. Have a drink with us, she ordered. No, I said, I'm going upstairs. When are you coming up? Soon, she said. She wafted me away. I woke up to my mother on her side of the bed we shared, playing cards on the computer in the dark. Her eyes looked bloodshot in the glow of the screen. What time is it? I asked. Go back to bed, she said, without looking up. The next day, I woke to my mother furiously cleaning the house. Everything was spotless. I wondered if she had slept at all. In Grandpa's room, the nurse cleaned the saliva from the inside of his mouth with forceps and a cotton ball, the metal clanking gently against his teeth. I could smell his foul breath. I took his hand. It was soft like a flower petal. Your grandpa's got good skin these days, doesn't he? The nurse said. I nodded. Out of my grandpa's bedroom window, I spotted that same woman wearing a Cossack hat and a powder blue coat walking down the street. I quickly rushed out the door. There wasn't enough time for my mother to finish asking where I was going. Hello, I said, chasing after the woman. Please wait, I've been wanting to speak to you. She walked in a hurry. I followed her underground into the subway station. I was out of breath when the woman finally stopped to acknowledge me on the platform. Hello, she said back. She nodded at me. Her face was clean and softened with makeup and looked so small compared to the largeness of her hat. There were wrinkles around her eyes, a small mole near the left corner of her mouth. I've seen a lot of you lately, I said. You have? She said. The train rushed into view and we got on. You walked past our apartment, I said. On your way to the forest, I just want to know more about you, I said. Why do you dress like that? Are there others? What do you believe in? You ask a lot of questions, she said. I stopped at next. She handed me a card as the train slowed to a halt at the next station. It was for a tailor. Then she disappeared into the crowd. The tailor's shop was near the river, underneath one arch of a bridge that crossed it. When a train rumbled past overhead, everything shook. There was a different shop under every arch. In the shop, I felt like I'd stepped back in time. The man at the counter was dressed up in a shiny vest and pressed pants. He wore a top hat. The walls were covered in a dark red, old-fashioned wallpaper with gold flourishes. There was a lot of light coming in through the window, reflecting off the mirrors. I handed him the card that the woman had given me on the subway. He scrunched his face to study it. He had me stand up on a raised platform. He took my measurements without saying a word and handed me a piece of stationery with an amount on it. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was more than I earned in 3 months, but I said I would pay it. When the time came to pick up my Cossack hat and powder blue coat, I returned to the tailor and tried them on before the mirror. The coat fit me like a second layer of skin. It was warm inside. The blue color shimmered and moved under the light. I felt like a big fish. The fur of the Cossack hat tickled my face. When I studied myself in the mirror, I felt like a being from another world. I hid my new clothes in Grandpa's room under a stack of blankets in the closet while the nurse was out running errands. My mother would never find them there. Only Grandpa knew. He was awake. He lay there watching me. I felt ashamed and darted out of the room. The next day, I put my new clothes into a backpack and waited by the window in Grandpa's room for the woman in the Cossack hat to walk by. Where are you going? The nurse asked me. Oh, nowhere, I said. I have to return some things to an old friend. We're going to meet up today. He's watching you, the nurse said. Grandpa was following me with his eyes. I went up to him to hold his hand, and he gave mine a gentle squeeze. Hey, Grandpa, I said. Where is heaven today? Grandpa's mouth opened, and tears formed in his eyes. I'd never before seen him cry. The nurse came over and dabbed at his eyes. "Don't worry," she said to him. Sorry, "don't cry," she said to him. "He's very happy you're here," the nurse said to me. The feeling overwhelms him. At some point, old men become just like children again, very emotionally raw. I helped the nurse perform her regular morning routine. As she did her work, my grandpa's gaze turned glassy, like he was no longer in his body. I looked out the window every once in a while. When the woman in the Cossack hat finally appeared in the distance, I ran out the door. "I'm off," I shouted. "Don't be so loud," my mother said after me. I hurried after the woman with my new clothes and my backpack. After she walked into the forest, I paused at the bench to change into my new outfit. Then I too walked in. The air and light changed. Sun rays slipped into the environment through the gaps between trees. As I made my way further into the forest, I couldn't find any people. I wandered back and forth over the 10 blocks. They were here. I had to look more closely. I noticed a little trail that left the main pathway I had been walking on and followed it. After a while, there was a great stone gate. I walked through it. A beautiful lake came into view before me. It was a vibrant blue color, and around it there was a bright white field of snow. I remembered this exact scene from my childhood, walking through the woods with my grandfather. But how was this possible if the lake had dried up long ago? I had to rub my eyes and look again. I walked toward the shore and peered in. There was something odd about the lake. It wasn't what it seemed. It was a gathering of people who all wore powder blue coats. They had arranged their Cossack hats around them in a circle. Assembled together, they looked just like the surface of a calm body of water. Their eyes were closed, their faces painted a matching blue. Sensing a disturbance, some members opened their eyes. For a moment, I stood before a lake of 1,000 eyes. They took a look at me, noticed that I was dressed like them, and opened up a space to let me in. Nobody spoke, but everyone was tuned into a rhythm. Whenever the wind blew over us, there was a stirring of small body movements, tiny sounds coming from mouths. If a leaf fell upon someone's coat, our collective bodies gyrated the leaf across the surface in the most accurate way. These were people who practiced together all the time. I lay down in the space that they made for me. I took off my hat. Somebody painted my face. For a time, I was nothing but water. I lost track of my body for an afternoon until a stirring trembled through the people around me. I couldn't tell where it began. Everyone started to get up, and the lake was no more. Afterward, we rubbed the blue paint off of each other's cheeks. The woman I followed approached me. "I know you," she said, "from the other day." "Yes," I said. I brushed dirt and twigs off the back of my coat. "I remember this lake from my childhood." "Isn't it nice to bring it back?" she said. The gathering of Cossack hats and powder blue coats dispersed in a multitude of directions. Soon it was just the two of us. "We split up because we don't like to draw too much attention," she explained. "We want people to think the lake is real." "Why do you bother?" I asked. "I miss the days when we had the lake," she said. "I used to picnic here with my family when I was a little girl. Times change, but we can still try to bring back some things that are gone." She handed me a slip of paper. It had a list of numbers on it and reminded me of my grandpa's written out walking sequences. "Lake days," she said, "the days and hours that we meet to become the lake." The woman walked away. I changed back into my ordinary clothes. On my way home, I walked slowly, recording every turn I made on the back of the sheet of paper the woman had given me. Left, straight, right, left, straight, left, right, and then a left. The apartment was quiet when I entered. My mother was sleeping in her room. The nurse was out. Only Grandpa was awake. The nurse had left the TV on for him. "Grandpa," I said, "take a look at this." I crawled into the bed next to him and held the sheet up before his eyes. I thought I could see him trying to forge his way through memory, mapping out where the directions would take him. His mouth stretched open. His hand was smooth as ever, like a lake surface, like there was so much life beneath. Thank you.